Hi, today we are going to talk about the difference between presumptive and confirmatory tests when dealing with drugs. So when they're dealing with figuring out what type of drug is present, whether or not it's a quick traffic stop and they find, white powder in the front seat, or whether it's been something that's been confiscated and sent to the lab, they need to know the proper testing to do. So the first one we're going to take a look at is presumptive tests. Presumptive tests are tests that assume or presume a substance is present if a reaction occurs. These are the tests that they're going to do out in the field. So a lot of police officers and crime scene investigators have small kits, their drug testing kits in their cars, and all they have to do is take a couple of drops of a specific substance onto a drug in question, and if a reaction occurs, they're going to assume that that drug is present. Okay, they're called spot tests, and for example, the decoy-Levine test is the decoy-Levine is a reagent that when it comes in contact with cannabis, which is the main ingredient in marijuana, it turns purple. Okay, so if you have a little baggie of what they would think might be marijuana, they might take a little bit out, they might drop a couple of drops of the decoy-Levine test on it, and if you get a purple color, then they would assume at that point in time that marijuana is present. They would then confiscate the rest of the drugs that are there, and they would send those to the lab for a confirmatory test. The issue with presumptive tests is that it is possible for them to give false positives. Usually, there are other substances out there that could potentially also give that color. So they always send it away to actually get the confirmatory test and make certain that that is the drug that reacted. What the presumptive tests allow officers to do is to write a proper ticket. So if they go through and they test and they're like, okay, yes, it turned purple, we're going to assume that this is cannabis, then they're able to write the individual a ticket and charge the individual with that information or with whatever charges that are present. And then the drugs go to the lab and they do a confirmatory test to make certain. If the test was wrong, then they drop the charges. And if the test is correct, then they move forward with them and they go to court and they can present their findings in that way. So here's some examples of confirmatory tests that are ran. For marijuana, it's the decoy-Levine test. So you can put that for number 1, marijuana. It turns a blue-violet color if marijuana is present. That's the reagent. For LSD, so if they're trying to figure out if LSD is present, a lot of times for LSD, they have them in like pill forms, or they have them in sticker forms or different things like that, and they can put the Ehrlich Van Yerk reagent on it, and it turns a blue-violet color if LSD is present. Okay, it turns a blue color. And the other one that I want you guys to jot down is for heroin. It's the Marquis test. And notice the Marquis test actually gets used for heroin and amphetamines, but it turns a different color for each one. So for heroin, if they think that somebody has heroin, they can put the Marquis test on it and it will turn purple. If they put the Marquis test on something and it turns a reddish orange brown color, that means it's an amphetamine of some type. So that's kind of a nice test because you can kind of double up. So if you are taking a look here, okay, and you had down here at the bottom where it says the Marquis test, you got a purple color, you would then know that that was heroin. For the DK test, the DK test is actually kind of also a nice one because it tests for amphetamines, it tests for cocaine, and no reaction will be heroin, and then violet color for barbiturates. So the DK test, if you got a yellow on it right here, like this one has, you can see that that would mean that cocaine is present. So there's lots of different reagents that you can use, and they have like a little kit, and all they have to do is, if they think that it's, and officers are pretty good at being able to figure out what they think it probably is, they can just put a little drop of it. If it turns that color, they know it's present. they can confiscate the drugs, write the proper ticket, and then they can send it to the lab for a confirmatory test. Confirmatory tests are far more specific. They identify a specific substance or substances, and they can identify it down to basically like the batch it was made in. So not only is this cocaine, but it was made in this area of the country. It was made with this cartel, so on and so forth. They can get very, very specific with the confirmatory tests. And there's two specific tests that we're going to take a look at: infrared spectrometry and mass spectrometry. Those are going to be the ones that we do. So for infrared spectrometry or spectroscopy, you can kind of say it either way, what it does is you take a little bit of the drug, you put it into a machine, an infrared machine, and it sends energy into the compound. The compound, the drug, absorbs the energy and it bends the bonds that are holding it together, and depending on what type of compound it is, it'll make different peaks and valleys. And so here's 3 separate printouts of different infrared spectroscopy compounds. This is an aldehyde, this is an acid, this is an alcohol up here, and you can see they dip. You have valleys in certain places, and then you have peaks, and there's different ones. And you can see that the peaks and valleys look different depending on how much energy gets absorbed at certain locations. And so what they would do is they would put their unknown compound that they're trying to figure out what it is into the machine, and then they would compare it to these. And you can see if this is 1 and this is 2 and this is 3 and this is our unknown over here, which one do we get closest to? Well, this one has a big dip right here. It has a very, very long peak, and then a short, sharp dip, peaks, valleys, so on and so forth. If I were looking, I would say that this one is closest to acetic acid right here. I would say it's not exactly acetic acid. It's probably a different acid of some type, but it's definitely closest to this one. So like if this was a cocaine and this was a cocaine, we might say that they were both cocaine, but they were made in different batches. So it would look similar, but not exact, and they would keep running through all their testing. They have like huge amounts of control samples of these until they found an exact match. The second confirmatory test that you can run is mass spectroscopy using a mass spectrometer. This one uses electrons. So you take your substance, whatever unknown drug you have, you put it in a mass spec machine, and this one uses electrons. It basically shoots or fires electrons at the drug, and it breaks it apart into its individual components. So usually drugs are several molecules all kind of put together. They're large molecules, and it breaks it into their original components, and then it separates them according to their masses, big and small. So you can see like this one, there was a piece here, there were several small pieces here, there was a large piece here, there was a large piece here, so on and so forth. This one, all the pieces were here, so on and so forth. And so what they do then is they're able to match it. So if this is our unknown and these were our 3 knowns, you can see that unknown. I'm going to get rid of my lines here, sorry. You can see that the same lines in the same locations on the graph matches with unknown number down here, number 3, right? You can see that. You can see that these lines, there's tiny little line here, and then 2 big spikes here, and then another big spike at 60 here, and so you can see that these 2 are a match. So then they would be able to identify that this is an acid right here as well, okay? So when you're looking at the confirmatory test, you're basically looking to see what matches, and that is what then you're able to use to help you. So we'll do a little bit more practice with this. I'll give you some kind of an assignment that you'll have to go through and find the presumptive test for, the confirmatory test, and make a match with. But the 2 confirmatory tests that we use are infrared spectrometry and mass spectrometry.